Thanks, Max. And you said you can't stay, correct?
I just need to step out of the room for a bit, but you can go ahead, and I think Rob's pretty much taking up most of the time anyway today.
Okay. Could I ask somebody else to volunteer today to take minutes?
Well, I'm recording as well, so I can just take.
Oh, you take, okay. All right, great. Thanks, Max. Okay. Looks like we have a quorum. For those people who are new to this, my name is Mark Eckert. This is my first day chairing this committee. Thank you for everybody else on the committee to showing up. Did everybody get a copy of the agenda? And did anybody have anything else to add to the agenda?
It's a question, do we want to talk about proposed uses in terms of a trail system, or save that for another meeting?
For the site,
Yeah.
all the different proposed uses? We can do that. I wondered if that would come up when we were talking about the timeline.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay, is that all right? Okay,
Could I,
yep.
could we take a minute if we've got time to talk about centralized documents for people to have access to?
Okay. Let me add that. Okay. Anybody else? All right, Max had sent out two copies of minutes from two previous meetings. I don't know that they were ever approved. So I think we should do that first. Did everybody have a chance to look over the minutes from November 14th and December 5th? Okay. On the minutes for November 14th, were there any questions or addendums to the minutes? Looks like it was basically a recap of Max and Morgan's walking of the trail and whatnot. So,
I'll make a motion to accept those minutes.
all right, thank you. Anybody have a second? Second, okay. Any other questions? All in favor of accepting the minutes as proposed, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Those minutes are approved without changes. Thank you. And for the minutes of December 5th. Anybody have any questions? Anybody want to make a motion to approve?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Second it, great. So just for Max's benefit, Janet seconded the minutes there. Carl seconded the first row of minutes. Mike moved both sets. Any other questions? All in favor of accepting the minutes?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I will abstain because I was absent.
Okay, noted. Carl abstains. All right, great. Then let's get to the agenda for the day. All right. Any citizen comments? No, okay, great. All right, so now we're on to item number 5, old business. First item under that is capping Sylvania, which I believe is.
So I know that was a big discussion at our last meeting. I'm sorry I could not be here. But this time I am here, and I invited Rob Prue from Pine Tree Engineering. He has capped our last 2 landfills, done the engineering, the design and engineering for our landfills. So I thought we could give him a shout. And I just wanted to stress that this was not a requirement, the capping. It was, and I think this was a leftover from the task force. We always wanted to aesthetically cover, and that was always one of the questions we had about covering the foundation, and I don't know how much of the parking lot, even if it's just to make it look better. But then when I met with Rob and talked about it, was like, well, do we want recreation there? So I thought it would be a great time for him to come and meet with all of you and see what your thoughts were as we proceed. And since we've had such a wonderful working experience with Rob and his group, I took the liberty of asking him, because he's already on staff. He's already one of our engineers that we can choose from. So here he is.
Okay, thank you, Julie.
Okay.
So Max has definitely overstated my involvement tonight. I'm really here to listen. Julie says you folks have been talking for a couple of years now, and threw a lot of ideas around of how to develop the site. So she brought me in. My role is to sort of help implement your development plans. I'm not a geologist. I'm not a groundwater scientist. We're not going to go back and investigate. That's all been done. And now it's like to try to help you prepare plans for what you'd like to see out there, what your vision is. I went through a lot of the documents that Julie sent me. It's very clear that we cannot excavate out there. So everything we have to do is up. So after we met, I did walk the site. It's primarily pavement and foundations, as you know. So I'm not coming here with any plans or ideas. My job is to help you develop your ideas and plans. We also did the 2 ball fields at the rec center many years ago. Bill Post called me to help move that along into the construction phase. We did construction docs, put it out to bid, and followed it. So, we really like to implement and build things. I really don't like studies. Nothing comes out of a study. So I like to do more of the implementation. So we're civil engineers. So, I work for 8 or 10 different towns around the state, helping do anything from road projects to parking lots. We just did a basketball court for the town of Norway. They got a grant from New Balance, who has a factory right in Norway, right next door, actually. So nice fenced in, paved basketball, glass backboards, very nice court. So we just did that. And so we do a variety of things. So I think we can help you have your vision come forward, whatever that might be.
John?
Well, I got a quick question. I'm gonna plead ignorance, but when you say cap the site, what does that consist of? I mean, do you cement it? Do you
Yeah,
tar
that's-
it? What is that?
Yeah, I don't know that we're really looking to cap the site. Otherwise, if you're gonna build a basketball court, you're gonna
Yeah.
cap it with a basketball court. So when Julie first emailed me on this, she's, talking about trying to improve the looks of the site. So we're not looking about putting a clay cap on it like you would a landfill. I don't think that's not the idea. But, if you're looking for green space, then maybe we do cap it with some clay and put grass on top of what's there. The hard thing is trying to grow anything on top of impervious surfaces. That's obviously an issue. And I don't think we want to just pave a basketball court on top of the old cracked pavement, because that's always just going to crack. So,
And the reason that you want to cap it, as you say, is to keep whatever is down there.
no,
What's
this
the
is
ration?
this is an aesthetics
More
and
aesthetic?
usability phase now.
I see.
So this has already been studied to death. You already have a groundwater
Yeah.
extraction program going for treatment. That's all done. Now is, what can you do? So capping could be simple as putting some grass over some areas, but you can't just put loam on concrete and expect it to grow in July. So, there's ways you could build it up with soil and make some mounds and, make some green space out of it. It depends what you want. If you want green space,
Mhm.
or a basketball court was mentioned, a pickleball court was mentioned. I'm sure there's other ideas. So the palette is blank right now, as far as I'm concerned. It's just a matter of, trying to, there are, a few site constraints. Obviously, you're not looking to build residential housing. You can't have residential use on that site. But the big thing is we can't excavate. So that's probably our biggest challenge, but it's not a huge challenge.
Based on your experience, what is the longevity for any kind of material that you would put on there to cap that site if there's going to be public use of it?
It all depends what we do.
Okay. And would you have a recommendation, like if we come back and say we want to open this up and have X amount of traffic on it, would there be a difference in what you would cap it with?
If you want to make a parking lot on top of the parking lot, that's already broken up pavement, I think we'd want to build that up. And,
Okay.
possibly put some more gravel in and repave it to
Okay.
make it more durable.
Right, okay,
But on the other hand, you could park on what's there. So,
right.
it's a broken up old parking lot. Doesn't mean you have to do anything to it. You can still use it as parking.
Okay.
So you have options. If you're gonna do the basketball court idea, I kind of like the idea of putting on a nice solid slab that's there. That's a good foundation. It's a lot more solid than the broken pavement.
And you're talking about the footprint of the old building? Okay. Okay,
So again, I don't have plans or ideas, here to listen. And then, once you folks do get sort of a mission, we try to start developing some plans.
anybody else have any? Yeah,
Yeah, Rob, this isn't a question for you, but maybe for the folks who were on the previous committee, if there was a belief on the part of the committee that capping was something that needed to get done, could someone who's been on the committee for a while talk about why that was?
We talked about it for two reasons. And I'll
Yeah.
go first. And one was to try, and one of the reasons we're not allowed to disturb it is to try to prevent infiltration of more toxins into groundwater. So one of the reasons was to cap it. And we talked about that so that right now it's breaking up and roots are going in and it's no longer impervious at all. So some of it was tied to remediation, which is why we were not allowed to break it up. And then the other was aesthetics, as Julie said. I mean, we don't want to look at that. It's just going to keep breaking up with every frosty winter we have. And so.
And it looks like a derelict property. There are
Right.
weeds growing through the cracks and it's just an eyesore.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so both of those reasons. Initially, DEP said we couldn't do a cap. And then they changed their mind, because it might be disturbing. That wasn't in the covenant, but then they later said we could do a cap, which is what precipitated.
And
all this.
anything, I mean, Rob would have to work very closely with the DEP on, we're not going to go too far down the path without checking with the DEP and saying, hey, can we do this? And what would you like to see?
Right. Usually we start with what we call a conceptual design, concept plan. Here's our idea, show it to the DEP, make sure we're not spending a lot of money going down the wrong path. They say, yeah, that's a good idea. And then you develop more details from there.
And the other good thing with Rob is that he's had extensive experience working with our Public Works Department. So when it comes to doing some of this work, there's also the potential, since he knows their capabilities and works extremely well with John Daigle, and many people don't realize, we have our own gravel pit. The town actually owns a gravel pit. Not in our town, amazingly, but in another nearby town. And that's where we get a lot of all of our sand for our winter sand, but a lot of our fill and things like that. We also were integral part of capping. The Public Works Department was an integral part of capping the existing landfills we have. So, there's some economics to that too. And it's just a nice, so I don't know what will happen, but there's a lot of interesting ideas and out of the box thinking when it can come to this.
Rob? I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Jen.
A little unclear on if say you want to have pickleball or other recreational uses on the road, do you still have to cover that cement with something, grass or whatever, turf, and then you would put a concrete, whatever surface you want for.
No, I think if you're going to build on that concrete slab, you could build right up you could pave on that, for example.
Okay.
That's a
Same with
solid
the
base
parking.
already. You don't need to
Okay.
put earth in between them.
And I don't know, maybe it's worth just your coming and showing him. This map shows also the whole disposal area. Does that have to be capped? Or are we just talking about the part you can see when you drive down 220?
My understanding has always been that if we wanted to, we could cap, well, I agree in the beginning when we were talking about the foundation and the parking lot. And we wanted a cap, and I think you brought up a bentonite. Am I crazy? Okay, I
No,
do remember.
bentonite's correct.
We were told, no. It was never beyond, I don't think any of our discussions, at least from my recollection, went beyond the foundation and the parking lot. And when I say a cap, a covering, I don't know what else to call it.
Okay, can I ask a nuts and bolts question?
Sure.
You mentioned growing things on top of soil that's placed on top of a slab, and that's all about water. Water percolates through the cracks in the concrete now. If we were going to cap it with something, you know, you need to get water for plants to grow, and it's not going to percolate up through the
No.
concrete.
No.
And during a rainstorm, you're going to make mud on top of the concrete. How can we do something with the slab still there that at least requires irrigation and may require drainage? And how expensive are those things?
Well, you know, we're not gonna be able to get into subsurface drainage because we can't excavate. So, you know, what you might envision is if you wanted some contours to the land, you put some, built up some, and I'm thinking more lawn areas when I say plantings. I don't really think this is a place you're gonna start.
No, I'm not thinking of a
planting
garden
trees.
either.
Right. I don't think you're planting trees because you're not gonna, roots aren't gonna be able to get, you know, proper oxygen and water. So you're talking grass. So if you can slope it such that you'll get a runoff off the grass, then have drainage swales where it drains it off the site.
Just a quick question. The definition of excavation, you mentioned that a couple times. What does that entail? Does that mean you can't stick a shovel in there and pull up one spade, or
So that's my understanding for reading.
so, but you can make gradations and culverts and
No.
you can do,
Build
okay.
up.
So it's all,
But I think the whole idea from what I read, and I did some pretty quick reading, but a lot of history here. They don't want you to start digging into any contaminated soils and bringing it somewhere else and
Right.
creating another
Right.
problem.
Right.
So you leave it alone, build up.
It sounds like on the concrete, at least, there's the thought that that's a very stable base. So if we were going to think about courts of any type, it sounds like that could be a twofer where you're capping, where the task force was concerned about infiltration. That would be capped. And then you'll have really nice stable courts. And I see my recreation director sitting here saying, oh, this sounds amazing. For outside recreation.
Yeah, can you clarify what you mean by concrete? Because everything looks to me like it's concrete.
Well,
There's the parking lot
me-
and there's the
There's a lot of
slab.
pavement out there. I don't know how clear it is.
yeah,
Asphalt,
to me, there's asphalt and then there's concrete. The concrete portion would be where I think the building was.
Okay, the
Right.
pad.
The pad, and
Okay,
then the,
all right,
I thought the rest of it always looked paved to me.
Yes,
Okay.
it is, Julie.
okay.
This is the building footprint right here. So
Yeah.
that's concrete, what I call the concrete slab.
Okay.
It's elevated from the parking lot.
Right,
It
yeah,
is. And then the whole, you drive in this, on this, I don't know what side that is, I guess the west side. This is all paved parking lot. It's not drawn, this is an old plan,
Okay.
but these lines here basically denote, I believe, the edge of pavement.
Yep.
So when I drove in, I parked back here, and that's vast area of broken up pavement. And then there's the other driveway over here, there's more pavement. So when I talk about the slab, it's, you know, basically the old building footprint.
It's actually good parking right along the side that faces 220. And that's sort of the most intact.
Right.
There's a whole row.
You know, and certainly what you have for pavement could be
Yeah, it's
utilized for parking as it is.
It's amazing to me that, I mean, I have to say, I never even thought about use what's there. Like, that's a great idea, because it's a twofer.
Now, what you could do if you wanted to clean it up, put an overlay on it. Much like we would a roadway. And ultimately, some of those cracks are gonna come back, but you could get a nice, clean surface, get proper drainage, you'd be able to stripe it better for parking spaces,
Mhm.
things like that.
Say,
Good.
Rob,
Yeah.
in the case of, say, for instance, just putting a crown of some substrate over the concrete slabs, and that's almost 60,000 square feet.
Mhm.
A 1% grade across a crown to daylight the surface water at the perimeter, would that be sufficient?
Well, if it's a hard paved surface, 1 to 2%.
Yeah.
If it's more of a grass, I would want to see more like 3 or 4.
Okay, so if you do
Just
the math,
to give people a point of reference, a roadway crown is 2%,
2%.
just to give you a feel for that number.
Yeah, to do the math, you're going to end up with, in that 60,000 square foot area with the two concrete slabs, you're going to end up with almost a 3-foot elevation differential from the center to the edge.
You could,
So in order to accomplish that, the computations are pretty big. Are you talking upwards of 15,000 cubic yards, maybe 20, just for the concrete slab?
Potentially.
Yeah.
And I haven't done I haven't run
And we
any
have,
numbers on
and
it.
we can source that quantity of material from our existing pit.
It's extensive. So I'm not good with volume,
Who is?
but give me are we talking?
What's an acre and a half?
Oh, yeah.
And it's. an
Okay,
acre and a
that's
half.
good. See,
And-
yeah.
And in the center, in order to have a 3-foot delta between the center of the crown and the perimeter, perhaps you could have, 5 feet of material terminating in 2 feet at the perimeter, so you can
Depends.
approximately daylight.
Yeah,
Of course, you have to daylight it towards existing swales and existing perimeter grades.
I'll let John Daigle answer that, but I'm sure they can figure that out. But we have an extensive gravel pit.
Good, so
yeah.
doability is there for the material.
If that's the material that we would need to do that, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what's in that pit, but you don't want all clean gravel under grass because that'll just dry out as well. So
And do we have a source for loam topsoil?
I don't
that-
know the
that
answer to
scale?
that. I'm not sure what's in that pit. I know the
Ours is
landfill
More fill.
contractor had to get clay from another pit. So,
But I'm just talking about fill. I'm not,
Right.
I don't know what the topsoil situation.
but,
Yeah.
well, yeah, loam, you probably don't have a loam source, I'm guessing, of any quantity.
Yeah, so it really reduces the probability of sustainable turf of any sort.
Right.
That's where I'm headed.
Right.
That's why the courts, that was an interesting, I never thought of.
Bob?
If your slope is 1/8 of an inch per foot.
Right.
Which is fairly typical, at least for interior construction. You're still gonna impact, if you're putting courts on it, play area, because you're gonna be playing on a surface that slopes.
Which it should anyway, for an outdoor court, should
For
have
rain,
some.
for
slope.
drainage, you should, but I think we need to keep that in mind
Right.
when we talk about.
I know in the Norway court, we tipped it from one side to the other 6 inches.
Yep.
So, and it's a pave. So back to your original question, if you have a hard surface, you can go flatter, much like interior construction, because it'll drain better. But when you have grass, you want a little more pitch to get it to drain.
Janet?
I feel like we need to know how much square footage we need for courts first. I mean, we don't need to pave this. I'm looking at the that cool drone footage.
Don't get Marcus excited.
It would be useful to know what you're envisioning.
He's
for-
thinking roller rink.
Whatever, but how, like, the average pickleball court and how many you
Pickleball, a
want,
pickleball court is 20 by 44 feet.
and yeah, and how many would you want, we need to have some numbers like that to be able to come up with some sort of concept or, and also I'm curious, I just personally, we have the rec center behind Miller. We have the football fields across from Miller.
No.
Not anymore.
That's owned by Little League,
Oh, well, I mean.
but we have it. I mean, it's
Yeah,
in town.
I'm
but
just saying a
it's-
recreational resource, but I'm just curious what's needed from a town perspective in terms of space here
Yeah, we don't,
and why we wouldn't put pickleball over where the rec center already is, for instance. I don't mind the idea here at all, but I'm just
Yeah.
curious about
So
why.
the rec fields are pretty full. They take, the other half of the property there isn't really usable because of wetlands.
Okay,
We've looked at putting other stuff there and there's just not room.
okay,
So we've talked about, up at 80 Gray, there's tennis courts that are basically unusable. We do need to, they were built with a grant
right.
and we need to fix them up somewhere or whatnot, but that site isn't the best. There's a huge drainage pipe under those courts, which is what caused them to heave and crack in the first place.
Right.
So since Sylvania has become an option, it's, where the building was is pretty flat and I don't know, in my own head, I know everyone, there's 15 people here with 15 different visions. I could see, capping over most of it, leaving some parking, having some green space, and then where the building was, putting some courts. I get requests for outdoor pickleball courts all the time, like
Yeah, no, I,
weekly.
yeah,
Um,
okay.
And so I could see at least 2 courts, if not 3, and you can put tennis courts in with those. And then we don't have an outside basketball court anymore. There used to be one in front of Miller School. That'd be great. That they it deteriorated and the school ended up putting in a new driveway, and then 80 Gray had a couple,
They are well used.
yeah.
And so tennis too, you're thinking?
Yeah, I don't think there's much point to build pickleball courts, just pickleball courts, because you can put a pickleball court on a tennis court. You can actually put two. So you might as well build tennis courts and put pickleball on it, and it's not gonna make it any bigger of a space. It's just gonna be extra lines. So for the cost of the extra paint for the lines, you're gonna appease two different groups.
Is that what I was seeing up at the Jefferson school where have they companion pickleball in tennis courts? Is that-
Belfast. they do that.
Probably,
Yeah.
I know they play pickleball in Jefferson, as long as it's above 17 degrees outside, they play all winter long outside.
So it'd be great to have, if you could just send us dimensions
Yeah, I could,
and sort of your vision, I guess, like
Sure.
2 pickleball or whatever.
yeah,
Tennis courts, a basketball court, what, and the dimension of those, so we can get a sense of what can fit on this.
yeah, that's not a problem.
I have a question. Does anybody have envision any other use for the slab other than recreational courts? Bob?
The task force envisioned solar panels, and that was almost unanimously, if not unanimously.
Right.
And that was shot down by the town.
By the town, exactly.
We were surprised, I have to say, I was
But
surprised.
we might be well advised to leave that possibility open when we're thinking about capping it.
So put down something that,
Just put something up down that at some point could be converted.
Or some of it to provide electricity for lights or whatever you're gonna want to have there.
John?
I recall, I think, I might have suggested it, that just leave the area as it is and let it grow wild for a bit. I mean, there's a trend to let wild spaces just go. So maybe just leave it there until there's maybe a better focus.
I'm talking about the footprint of the building only.
Just that,
Yeah,
okay,
that's all I was talking
just,
about.
okay.
Yeah.
I was talking about.
We've been talking about having courts there, and I just wanted to know if there was still another use that we envisioned. I'd forgotten that the solar farm was thought of going on that footprint too. Anybody else have any other things? Are they?
Yes.
Oh, John.
Sorry. I just wanted to Janet had asked a great question, why there for recreation. So we have the trailer park. We have some affordable housing right there.
A sidewalk.
So it's really great. It would be a great place for kids in that area. So that's one of the requests that we get a lot is that area needs some type of recreation, public recreation. So that would be a very nice fit in that area.
I had one suggestion. Hi, guys.
Hi, Patty.
How are you? We had mentioned at one point some kind of a covered pavilion or something, and I don't know if that's for that particular place where the slab's going to be or somewhere else on the property, but that could be multi-uses if we have some kind of covered pavilion. And I think that was brought up by some town members as well.
Yep. Janet?
I mean, I personally don't love the idea of the whole thing being turned into pavement, although I can see a lot of it being turned into pavement. But I like the idea of having, if we're gonna have trails in the back part, some significant stretch of it that's green to put the trail, so you don't feel like you're walking through like two completely different things, to try to blend that somehow.
In my head, I said, it's just in my head, but I could see the courts and all that fitting on the footprint pretty easily, just ballparking it in my head.
Yeah.
And I mean, the parking lot that there is massive.
Yeah.
And we don't need all that. And so in my head, I see courts on the footprint, the parking either in the front where it was or down the side a little bit, but that entire back parking lot, I could see becoming green space. And maybe there's plenty of room for a covered pavilion, or there's a lot of space back there.
Yeah.
Mike?
Yeah, and further into Johnny's thoughts, when they say you can't excavate there, can you plane the asphalt and return that to grass?
That I don't know.
and the concrete. And, when you do brownfield building redevelopment, a lot of times you bring a concrete crusher on site and just cut out the slabs, crush them, lay them down. And
On its face, it sounds very unlikely that the DEP wants to see us increase permeability at the site.
yeah, well, I was thinking of when we were talking about grass earlier, if it's not going to grow, you can't, without water, you can't irrigate it because that'll increase the water going into the ground. So it's almost 6 of one, half dozen of the other, because if you got the water that's coming down as rain onto the site and it's percolating on the ground, if you break up the pavement, it's the same water is going to go into the ground. And by tearing up the asphalt or tearing up the concrete, making it fully permeable, it'll just go into the ground faster, but no more will go into the ground faster. So
That would be a
if you-
question for the
if-
DEP,
yeah.
whether it would allow you to strip the pavement off.
if he wanted to let it go back to nature, as he suggested, that would be one way to do it.
Well, and also, as I think you're getting to, if you wanted to grass that over, it would obviously be much better.
Whether it
if
was
we could
grass-
strip the
grass-
pavement off, then you're putting on.
Grass or a wild meadow or whatever you wanted to do.
Yeah, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
Because it's just going to be always hard to grow anything on top of a paved surface, even if it is broken up.
What
We've
about-
had these drought summers lately, trying to keep something alive.
How much, like, so say you have, like, they don't let us touch the pavement, it is cracked, so that helps stuff come up through, but how much dirt or soil would you have to bring in for grass to be able to grow on top of that
Probably,
without much resistance?
I would say a couple feet. Yeah, I mean, you're gonna want a good loam layer. And then in order to try to prevent some drought, you put a clay layer in there, not a real tight clay, but something that holds water.
Right.
And then maybe some granular under that. I don't, depending what the layer might look like.
Yeah, unless I'm mistaken, a growth substrate, loamy soil, is going to be the real determiner of our capabilities of sourcing.
Right.
Because I capped a Superfund site with 16,000 cubic yards of material. And it was an opportunity made available to me at the time because of the building boom. And topsoil is a burden to any developer who's putting it in road surfaces that need compaction. And we had a couple of subdivisions, and we had a tractor supply and even a Ford dealership who gave us their topsoil. And that constituted about a third of that 18,000 yards that we put in. Finding topsoil for these surfaces is going to be a huge challenge. We got the fill town pit. We have volume, but getting some clay into that material to retain moisture and then some loam at the top, seems to me that's going to be a huge obstacle.
Well, it's gonna be a cost, obviously.
Yeah.
John?
Can I ask you a question? You seem to have some experience, and it might be outside the purview of this committee, but if you do put a cap or loam, whatever, does that in any way affect what's already underneath there as far as those chemicals and various other things? Does it change it in any way or make it worse or exacerbate it?
There's not enough material weight to alter the compactability of the concrete, so it wouldn't be a factor.
And as far as the drainage and the water, does
Well-
that change any of the
I
hydrology?
was capping an already permeable environment, so this is all new to me.
It would reduce, I would think, the risk a little bit,
Yeah.
whether it's bentonite or paved, and it's, because right now, I mean, just look at this photograph, it's pockmarked with cracks and water's
Oh,
going in.
I jogged there for the last
Oh.
5-6 years. That
Right.
that concrete is just a mess.
Yeah, and it's gonna
Roots
keep doing that, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I have a
So-
question about bentonite,
Yeah.
because, you look at the town landfill, and it's got nice grass cover on it now, and I assume it's not being irrigated. I mean, clay holds water, so it seems like, I think you first suggested a clay cap with turf on it for any areas we want to have just be grass. Is that not something?
Yeah, I just said that.
Okay, that's what you were saying. Okay, sorry, but I didn't know if you wanted just clay
Well,
or how that, so then
Yeah,
the
I mean,
moisture isn't going to be as much.
for a landfill like you have, I mean, it has to be a certain tight clay, so no water
Right.
practically gets through it.
It was sourced in Waldeboro, I can tell you.
Right.
Marine clay probably.
So yeah, you definitely need a clay layer under loam, otherwise you're gonna have this droughty situation where
Right,
the water
okay,
just drains
so-
through. And
But
even
that
even
seems-
with that, with some drought, you may end up having, depending how green you want, if you let it go natural, that's fine. if you're on a park-like lawn, it's gonna need some water potentially in July and August. Which doesn't sound like you're headed that way.
Wildflower.
So
Butterfly garden.
I was thinking we should have a community bee garden now.
Yeah.
in the interest of time, and since Rob has provided us with a lot of information, but we don't have a plan yet for what we want to implement yet, I was wondering if we could wrap up this discussion and then move on to the next item, which is the timeline, where we would have to talk about actually developing the plans for what we want to do with the site. Does anybody have any other last questions or things for Rob before we move on?
I have a lot of questions. I have one more again, just if you look at the actual aerial or this map here, there's a whole lot of crushed rock. There's a stone wall behind the site
Right.
going down the hill, and then there's this big area of just where they must have put a whole lot of debris. And I'm wondering if that's part of the plan here to cover that. And you can see it on this photo if you want to look, but when you walk over there, it looks like a bomb went off. It kind of.
I didn't talk about that at all with Rob.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm
but I-
not sure we have a plan yet, right? That's
Yeah,
what.
that's a wreck. You're right.
But I feel like that should be
We don't have a
part
plan.
of the
No.
whole
Hmm.
plan potentially. Or we screen it with vegetation, but if it's a place that's hazardous, that would probably be the most, in terms of people just walking around in there. Plus it's an eyesore. Okay, so just if the plan covers that greater area, I think that would be, or we talk about the greater area
Right.
here. So just
Okay.
throwing that out.
All right.
Oh, and just one more, as a path forward, how do we go about exploring your notion about milling the asphalt off and creating a more permeable?
We'll call Max and ask him.
Max, he's our man.
Max. at
Yeah.
DFP,
Oh,
yeah.
Max, look, okay.
If that's where we want to go.
I wrote it down.
Okay.
Planing the asphalt and slab.
So you'll check on that, or your Max will?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay,
we can figure that out.
okay.
And we'll let you know.
One last question. Does this have to go out to an RFP?
The construction?
This engineering study?
No,
Okay.
we already have 2 engineers on staff. So to be honest with, well, not on staff, but they're the ones that every July, the select board picks their attorneys and their engineers.
Okay.
I chose Rob here because
You worked with them.
he essentially capped our 2 landfills, and he has a working knowledge of our departments and our capabilities.
It's a great advantage.
Okay.
Great
that's
advantage to us.
It just seemed,
Yeah, I didn't know if it was required or how it works. I just was curious.
no,
Okay.
when it comes to for professionals, now when we put it out to bid, then we would put it out. I mean, we would,
The
the
construction.
construction would
The
go out. to
construction
bid.
out to
Fine.
bid.
Okay, good. Okay. Well, thank you very much, Robert. I appreciate you coming here, sharing your information with us. The next item on the agenda is to look at the timeline that Gail and Elida pulled together, where we actually start looking at timeframes for which we have to make decisions on moving forward with this site.
Are you set with me at this point?
You're good.
I think
Thank
that's,
you.
yeah.
Thank you all. It's
Thanks
nice
for
to
coming
meet
out.
Thank you, Rob.
Let me know what I can do to help as we get further.
Before he goes.
Yeah.
Do you have an architect on staff as well?
No, we do not.
You don't.
But what we are, we're civil engineers, we're not landscape architects, we're not geologists, so just want to be clear what we are and what we're not.
Okay,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
okay. So Gail and Elida, how would you like to share the timeline? Do you have?
I don't have extra copies. and I don't-
If anybody needs them, we can make them.
Can we make copies of it?
Share mine.
I can grab hers.
Did everybody get the timeline
Yeah.
via email? Sorry, I'm late.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Someone wants to look on my computer. I can write that down too. I have it copied.
Yeah. Elida, don't desert me. Okay, just to preface, this is an absolute draft based on our best understanding of what needed to get done. Available for lots of comments and moving things around. We just did our best with with the knowledge that we had. All right. So we started off with the belief that we needed a significant amount of time to be looking at RFPs and additional engineering studies, because that seemed to be what the conversation around the table had been. After speaking with Julie and Max, we came to the belief that those things no longer needed to be part of our planning. So knocked them out and did not include them in any kind of timetabling. I don't know if everyone is comfortable with that at this point. But that's the assumption that we started with.
What is so I was a little
Yeah.
confused. What was your vision of an engineering study versus, because I heard when it was explained to me, it was either a survey or an engineering study. Did you mean a survey of the property?
No.
Or what type of an engineering study?
Who are you asking?
Anybody?
Go ahead. I mean, my understanding of an engineering study was trying to figure out what we needed to do to cap the property.
Yeah, so what, Rob, I mean, I feel like we do need to spend a lot of time on the engineering study. It sounds like he needs advice on how many pickleball courts might you want, how many tennis courts, how much parking, where do we want green space? And I feel like we do have to spend some time doing that so that he can figure out where to cap with whatever kind of surface makes sense. So that's what I'm getting from today, but maybe I'm wrong.
So in my mind, that is the site plan. Like, what do we want to do? Not bringing a hydrologist in to study
Okay.
whether there are any issues, right? And my understanding from the conversations had been that there was actually additional analysis of the site that needed to be done. And that's what we were talking. That was my understanding of what the group was talking about when we were discussing an engineering study. And it sounds like that is not necessary.
Can we ask Julie to
Yeah.
define
I
this?
didn't hear
Why
Yeah.
what's the difference between an engineering study, or what is an engineering study? And is it something we need to have done?
Well, that was my question is I think that we're talking about the same thing, but we're calling it different names. I agree with Gail. I think she said it's a site plan.
It's a site plan.
It's a site plan. So I mean, I think that's going to involve Marcus going back to his committee and Marcus figuring out what are their needs, which is actually the next item. So I think we're actually right where we need to be after the pink.
All right. So there's no external study no one that we need to contract to study anything before we can get
I
moving.
think once we
All
figure out what we want
Alright.
to do with the property and have a plan in our head like that we agree on, then the engineer can come in and figure out how we make that happen.
Kind of what Gail and I asked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good, yeah.
Right. But not what we had walked out of our previous
Correct.
meetings understanding.
That's just
Yeah.
where I was
Yeah.
a little
Yeah.
confused.
Okay.
I mean, I feel like that site plan needs to go right up after the colored there is what we're going to be spending the next couple meetings on at least.
Okay. So there were just a couple of questions that had come up in the course of conversation that we thought it would be a good idea to get some answers to. And liked the idea of having a couple folks from the committee go out and get that information and bring it back to the table so that we all were working from the same information. One was to find out if there were any safety or health concerns that the Shellfish Committee, the Conservation Commission, anyone like that might have that they would want to share with us pertaining to the ways we could use the land and any restrictions on activities.
Is that why, Julie, you can't walk dogs down the landing either? Because the dog, you don't want the feces
Correct.
to go. So that is a big, I mean, is that
That's
a big?
That's huge.
Right.
Because I see on my street, because I'm right across there, the dog owners, well, they still go down there, but I love dogs, but they usually pick up everything, the waste.
It was a
Yeah.
huge issue, and the Shellfish Committee spent a lot of money
Okay.
having the water tested for DNA.
Right. And then they, okay, so that's a big no-no.
That's a
or-
big no-no.
Okay.
Okay. We figured that would be something that could happen pretty quickly. There'd been a question that someone had asked about whether the fire department might be able to demolish the Hoffs's house if we ended up going in that direction. And if that turned out to be the case and there wasn't a cost involved, that would save us a lot of time and worry about trying to figure out funding to get that work done. So we thought having a couple folks talk to the fire department
Oh,
again
John?
quickly would
I-
be
I-
a good thing. Yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt.
go ahead.
That Hofstas house is a thorn in my side because I've been jogging past it, looking at it, the roof is falling.
Yeah.
I'm a respiratory therapist. I've been doing this 35 years and I know what mold can do to
Yep.
anybody. I mean, I've seen it, believe me. And anybody who has any kind, no, you don't even have to have an asthmatic or COPD. I mean, mold is bad.
Right.
And I'm thinking that house has got to be inundated with mold. I'm assuming because the water's going right in. If you demolish it, or however, the fire department, then do they use, Julie, the foam with PFAS in it?
So
I think we're getting ahead of
I think we have
ourselves
to-
here.
I know, I
Yeah,
am.
you-
I think we have to take, I believe,
I just wanted to get that out.
Yeah.
just so-
isn't it asbestos on the outside?
Yeah.
Yeah.
you need
So
a-
we can't burn it.
Yeah, no, you can't burn it. And
Yeah.
I've already inquired about the asbestos mitigation cost per square foot on average for a 2.5 story building. You're looking at about a $5,000 contract
Okay.
to an asbestos mitigation company.
But we can have that conversation with either
So there's a lot of.
Okay.
detail
fire
in this.
department or the public works department, but Max should be included in that because he would be the one who would be getting the grant for any demolition.
Okay.
Very good.
Yeah, so basically, we've got some consults this month and next month. A goal of having a draft site plan put together by the committee by June, so by sometime in June, getting that out to DEP for comments immediately and hopefully getting some answers back from them pretty quickly. We've spoken already about our wish to have the Hoff's house put on the market and left there for 6 months before we make a decision about whether or not it needs to be demolished or whether it can be sold. So there's some timetabling for getting that out on the market and making a decision on the house by August. So we know whether that would be part of whether that lot would be part of our site plan or not. And in thinking about wanting to get moving on finalizing a draft plan, but then needing to wait for knowing whether the Hoffs's site is going to be part of it. We thought that maybe doing a plan A, plan B, like this is what we'd like it to look like if Hoffs's is not part of it. This is what we'd like it to look like if the Hoffs's site is going to if the house is going to get demolished, and we need to plan for that as well. So we don't have to wait until that decision is made before we can start doing our plan. All right, with a finalized plan in place by the end of the summer, we thought that would be the right time to have our community meeting and present that draft plan to the community. Make any amendments based on feedback or concerns that were raised at that point in the early fall. Have the capping done before winter. Haha.
I think you'll have an
right.
RFP by then,
You have
perhaps.
to have a town vote too. I don't know what.
Yeah, we're gonna,
Yeah.
and again, it all depends on what it would come back.
Okay, yeah. So this was basically set up to give us a year to get the planning done, and phase 1, which is the trail and easy stuff. Okay. A second year, so try to break the plan into a 3-year plan where we do the trail and parking, whatever, first. a second round of structures or whatever in year 2 and finish the project up in 3 parts by the end of 2025.
Okay.
It felt ambitious because of the capping, trying to get that all done in a year, but it's where we landed. Have at it. Yeah.
John?
I want to commend both of you. I thought it was it was an excellent synopsis of the task ahead. But I'm just wondering, so that's just an outline, it's just a timetable, and things can either accelerate it
Absolutely.
and or conflate it,
Mhm.
right? So it depends on, but this is just kind of like a bridge, a skeleton of what we could do.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's been
Yeah.
an organized way for us to start thinking about it.
right.
Yeah.
And something for us to refer to as we go forward. So if we're 2 months behind, then
Right.
what are we going to do about it? We can change it at any
I
point.
see.
yeah.
Any comments or questions or clarifications regarding the
Is this a
timeline?
document Mark, that we are using outside of our own personal, committee planning? I mean, obviously it's a public document, but is this something we're letting people think about? Or
About what?
and if this as a timeline, because where I come from, give myself 3 months for any target. And each target keeps sliding. It never comes this way, it goes that way. I just don't want us to reach a point where there's some sense that, well, they haven't missed a single deadline they gave us. How do we go about that? The public, the optics.
I wasn't envisioning this as a public document. I was envisioning this more as a working document for this committee. Is that possible?
Everything's a public document.
Well,
But
but
Right now.
I think it's a great for a working and I think, just setting up the meeting with these other groups.
Right.
Like we didn't have a shellfish meeting in January. We'll probably have one in February. So, I let them know, hey, somebody wants to come talk to you.
Right.
But it hasn't even, the selling was casually mentioned of the Hofstas house at a select board meeting by Bob at the last select board meeting. And, that's going to have to make its way back on the agenda if that's really the way you guys want to go.
That's the recommendation at the time that the committee had. And you made a good point, and that is, we need to decide what we're gonna do with that damn thing
Right.
before we figure out what we're.
And
doing.
actually, I was
Yeah.
gonna jump in because that is one of the items on the
For
table
February.
for February, for next month,
Right.
to decide whether we're gonna try to sell it or not.
And like, I wasn't sure, because I have some reservations about that. So I don't know when you want me to share those. Is this the proper time to share that or?
Yeah, and just to clarify, I think the decision at the last committee meeting was to put it on the market was based on the survey results from the town input. Is that right, Max? That was one of the recommendations that the town wanted, the
That's right.
community wanted us to sell the
In the
property.
November ballot.
Right, yeah. So that's why
Right.
so.
No,
But
I
go ahead.
understand.
What do you want to say
So-
about the?
One of the things that made me. So Janet knows this. I think Janet and Mike, I think you've been here almost from the beginning. Bob knows this well. The idea of owning it was never my intention. From a town manager standpoint, what changed my mind was when Lead Vance put it on the market. And what I saw as interest in the property. When I talked to the DEP and this idea had been floated, it was like, they were like, yes. And one of the reasons was, we know if the town of Waldeboro stumbles upon something, they're going to say, hello, here's something we need to look at. And if it's in private hands, something may pop up that may not then be said, hey, look at what we have here. That was one of the arguments that really made me change my mind of who's a good steward moving forward with the property. And that really I would say that's what changed my mind about ownership of the property. So from my standpoint of view, I understand that that was put on the ballot, but again, it was a non-binding, but I think as I've explained it to a couple of people who have asked me about it, they're like, hey, I never thought, like when I'm sitting in the booth thinking about, I'm not thinking like a town manager's thinking of what could potentially be the downside of selling it, which is, we have control of the site. We'll know if somebody's digging something, we'll know, you know what I mean? Like we're in control of what happens there. And
So
so there is some,
can I restate what you said to make sure I understand it?
yes,
You're concerned about selling the Hofs's property is that if a private entity owns it and they discover something that is potentially hazardous, they may not be as forthcoming as the town would be if we owned it and discovered something hazardous and we say, hey, we've got a problem here.
as it was described to me by the DEP, they said, we seem to have a good impression that your Sylvania committee at the time was the task force. Janet, do you remember this? Danger, danger, Will Robinson. That would go up, where somebody who has looked at it as an investment may not have those same concerns and say, okay, we're just gonna not say much about
This is
this.
gonna cost me money.
This is gonna cost me money, or potentially could cost me
Right,
money,
okay.
whereas the town would be a little bit more.
Bob?
I agree completely with what Julie has said. But I sense absolutely no danger on the Hofs's property beyond, up to a certain point. In other words, from 220 down about 1,000 feet, 800 feet, 900 feet, there is no ground contamination on that property. None. There's nothing to worry about. If we cut that out and either include the house on it or burn the house down or do whatever with the house and sell that piece, I don't think there's any danger in doing that. And I don't think we're going to have to yell Will Robinson to anybody, because we'll know it's clean. And we don't have to do an environmental study to determine that either, because we know where the plume is. We know where it's going. It's going nowhere near that house. It's way down the hill from it. And the only place it's going to go is in the river. Now, Johnny's raised some concern about the house, and I agree. So maybe the decision becomes we sell the property without the house after we've taken care of the house. And that will give us some revenue. I mean, we're going to need money for this project. And that's one way of offsetting some of the costs we know we're going to incur for doing the things we'd like to do. I think that's a source of revenue for the town that we should think about.
Okay, John?
Yeah, again, I'm gonna go back to, the house has got to be inundated with mold and various others. Is that fair to say, with all the
I
rain?
can't speak to it. I don't know.
Okay, because I'd like to get a site walkthrough. But if the town sold the house to an individual or whatever, and then they found it inundated with this horrible mold, wouldn't the town, doesn't the town have to tell them,
We have to disclose.
that's what I'm
There's a-
saying.
Like, just if you were selling anything, you
Okay.
Yeah,
disclose.
we have to do it.
And it's buyer beware. It's,
Right.
Yeah.
that's the open market. I was just saying that I just wanted my thoughts out there as to where that is.
Don't we have that essentially addressed by pre-consultation with DEP with respect to covenants on whatever parcel we intend to associate with the Hofs's house? So if we have a 2-acre piece, 80,000 square feet, whatever it is, and they say you're off, then it's out of our hands, and it's also been cleared by presumably the due diligence of DEP.
Yeah,
Correct.
it just.
Seems like it goes away.
I just want to say.
It seems like it. I also think that there might be other, like I said, committees and other departments that might say, hey, we have a use for that piece of property, or is that the place to put an amphitheater, or whatever you want to do. So I would wait till you met with the other departments and maybe make that recommendation a little further down the timeline. That's all I would say.
John?
One last comment. As far as a procedural matter, what would DEP need from the town concerning that house to assuage them or give them the go-ahead? Or do they just rule by fiat or dictum and say, no, you can't do that? How does that work?
I've never been fearful or received a dictum from the DEP.
Right. Well,
Um,
I'm not sure why the DEP would be involved with the
Well,
house.
I think we do have to have some conversation with them,
I mean,
but that's
yeah.
a conversation that Max, he's had, so I don't think it's a big deal, but.
There's like 3 hands now going up.
Well,
I think you had-
Alida?
Well, I just have a question. In January, we were hoping to just go speak with the people at the Shellfish Committees and Conservation Committees. Have some representatives from this group go talk to them, but it sounds like you're suggesting we need to go to one of their meetings to
Well-
share with them what our concerns are.
Well, what I would do is, I thought you were going to come to their meeting.
We were hoping to set up.
Yeah,
time with
I
individuals
was under
there.
the understanding that
Okay.
you were gonna get them
I
to
can-
connect with us.
Then I will do that.
Okay.
I can do that.
All right.
I just thought they can't, it's good to meet with those committee members, but I thought they're still gonna have to, after they meet with you, go back
For sure.
That's fine.
to their
Well,
committee.
Yeah.
So I just,
Yeah.
that was my only, because I was gonna talk to them at their meeting last week, but it was canceled.
Mike, was your
So
hand
I'll
up?
talk.
Yeah, I did. With regard to your concerns, Johnny, about mold, I share them. I was looking at a property on Route 32. And it was in pretty tough shape, and it was only going for $60,000. It was an actual house that was only going for $60,000. When I went into the basement,
Yeah.
the mold on the wood, there was like old wooden coal bin. It was an inch thick, and it wasn't the usual black mold. It was a white mold.
Yeah.
I got out of the cellar as soon as I could. Now, that said, it got sold,
Yeah.
and that they're taking care of the rehabbing of that house. There are firms that specialize in mold remediation.
Yeah.
And I'm confident that if a contractor bought the house,
Right.
they would have to do at least an
I see.
analysis and
Good.
maybe remediation.
Right.
Now, that's really on them. It's not on the town to do that.
Right.
And so I would be in favor of getting revenue from the sale of the house and getting an addition to the tax base. There's a housing crisis in the state, and getting another livable house in the town is a good idea.
I'm not sure that we could sell it for livable housing. We could sell
Well, no.
to have them tear it
The
down.
the developer would do
Well,
that.
that's
Either
up
whether
to
it would be
DEP.
tearing it
still-
down
It still can't be a resident.
It it can't be residential at all.
DEP
We'd
would
have
have
to
to-
get
the-
DEP.
on the
Houses.
Hofstas house.
The whole site is.
The whole site is,
The whole site is
Whole site.
there's no
residential.
plume there, and it's on town water and sewer.
It's my understanding it cannot be used for residential.
Unless DEP.
Unless
Unless
was-
DEP agrees with us, there should be.
Yeah, so, and they've said that they might, so it's possible, and that's a question we need to have answered, so we know, yes or no.
You might as
You
well,
want me to just
you
jump
should
in?
probably
Yeah.
come right up.
Yeah, so I did speak with Max Luke a bit about a bunch of these items. With the residential one, he says that's a very, very high bar that's gonna have to be crossed. Now, there is no objection to someone using it for commercial use if someone wants to fix it up and turn it into their office spaces. But, and I think this kind of ties to what Johnny was talking about. If the town just puts it on the market and gets a lot of interest from people, we would like filter out a bit of people and then go to DEP and say, this is the person who seems to have a good plan, and make sure DEP is fine with that plan. DEP just doesn't want someone to say, oh, well, I'll give you $50,000 and I'll turn it into an office space. They actually want to see that the person has a plan to do it. So that's this. It's not off the table to do residential, but it's just going to be very difficult, and someone who really wants to live in that place will want to turn it into residential.
But there's no objection on DEP's part at this point against putting the property on the market.
We just have to note, there is a covenant. That right now it is only allowed to be commercial.
Right.
And it would have to have DEP approval for that sale.
Okay.
They're pretty big hurdles.
Right.
But
Not-
at least we know what the market is telling us.
Yeah, I
We
think
can
it would
knock
be-
it off the list. Let's
Right.
move on.
Yeah, I'd like to.
Mm.
I'd like
So
to-
at the last meeting, did we not decide to recommend that the town put the house and 2 acres on the market.
Subject to select board approval.
Right.
Yes.
And so that hasn't changed. And Bob, what is the status of that?
It's under consideration. I mean, we need to put it on the agenda to talk about it.
It was
Okay.
it was not an agenda item. It was something you
No, it
mentioned
hasn't been on. the
during
agenda.
your report.
Okay,
Absolutely right.
All
We need to put it on the agenda and discuss it.
okay. So just for the sake of this committee, is everybody still on board with that recommendation from last month that we test the waters and see if we can sell the house and 2 acres for revenue?
I like the idea only because of the town article and the survey. Although it was close between sell it, demolish it. So I'm not, but it'd be nice to have, to say, no, it can't be, nobody's interested or
Mhm.
whatever.
Right.
I also like to point out with mold, when the Waldo Theater had languished for years, the mold was horrible. And it was like a 500,000 remediation plan with this expert in. But once we got a sump pump in there and aerated it out for a year or two, it was actually fine. And I look at the Hofs's house, it's a leaky old house. They don't generally have the mold problems that tight new houses have. So I'm not concerned about that being the hindrance. It's more, I wouldn't want to buy that. What's going on here? And I'm sort of assuming no one will want to, but I feel like we should try it and then we
Okay.
can tell.
You
the
would be
truth.
amazed when it was put on the market.
Oh, yeah.
The whole site.
Both sites were
Mhm.
sold separately. Yeah, I got quite a few calls.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was amazing.
For Hofs's house
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, Hofs's house was a hot item. It
As
was
a
more
commercial.
hot than the one next door.
Well,
I had people. I had some
But
people-
I will be, I'll just,
see, I'm
we'd
looking
have
at,
to properly vet whoever.
Well,
had the
yeah, I
plan.
would assume that would happen.
I would hope.
Is that,
So
Okay.
my question about the sale of the house of 2 acres is like with contract zoning, can you place codicils on the sale such that certain diligence must be performed by a certain date? Let me put it this way. Let me be blunt. This zip code doesn't need another vacant house purchased and then sitting unimproved for years,
yes, we don't.
if I may be blunt.
That's part of the plan that I was talking about that we had to give to the DEP. If someone says, well, I'm gonna buy it and, 5 years down the line, I might turn it into an office, the DEP probably doesn't want that.
So
Yeah,
we have
neither
that
does
hammer.
the town.
We have that
But
hammer.
again, we don't, once it's out of our control,
It's out
our
of our-
teeth are very dull then.
You can get
And I
some-
will. We are my fear is we're borrowing trouble, and I know you look at the money part of it, but there's also money and time and fighting that can occur after somebody buys it and they don't do what they want. Are you going to have the wherewithal and the internal fortitude to hold their feet to the fire, because that becomes costly too? So your $50,000 house that might sell for $35,000 could be eaten up in the second year with legal fees. I'm just saying, everybody's very excited, but the reality of this from a town management standpoint of the person who's going to have to clean it up is it could be costly. If we can have a grant that can tear it down and you have more space, I just wanted it out there. I just wanted to go on record. I wanted my concerns heard, and I think they've been heard, as much as Bob doesn't like my concern.
I fully appreciate it. You can bond for things like that. There's lots of things you can do to protect and hedge your risks, and bonding is one of them.
Well, and just so we know, that list that you give me as on a select board, that keeps growing. And just remember, there's other things too, so.
Point taken.
Because I don't know who's gonna be fighting with me.
So I want to point out the time here.
I
So,
was about to just say, I know Gail had her hand up.
yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah, Gail and then Janet, and then I think we want to start wrapping up.
Yeah, so Julie, when we talked, you shared these concerns,
Yes.
and the next step was going to be for you to have a conversation with the town attorney about terms of sale and any legal issues.
So
Yeah.
Max had the conversation with the DEP first.
Okay,
So he had that the other day. I will now contact the town attorney. I wanted to make sure that I was hopeful that some of my concerns might temper everybody's excitement to sell it, but we will make the phone call to the town attorney.
I don't
Okay.
know that everyone is excited. I think we were just following
Yeah.
through on
What
what,
the-
what
I know.
The vote was,
vote
yeah.
was, right?
Janet,
The one thing that I hadn't really thought about that you're giving me pause, Julie, is other houses in town that have been purchased and have been sitting there for years. And so we don't want that to happen. So if there is a way legally to not let that happen, I feel like any sale should be contingent. I don't know if you can do that because it might be saying
my
you can't
question.
buy it or, you know.
It's a,
So I see what you're
sticky wicket.
saying. Yes, I hadn't really thought about
It's a
that.
sticky
So-
wicket.
Someone could come in with the best laid plans and, you know, this sounds fantastic, and you sell it and they don't do it.
Yeah,
No.
which we
Then what do
have
you-
a few of those.
what do you
in
have over
town.
them?
Bob?
Right.
Nothing. They
Prime
don't-
example is 80 Gray. We have control
Dear.
through the sale of that property, how it's gonna be used. We have a contract, we're gonna have bonds, it's gonna be tight. And I see no reason why we can't do the same thing with this property if we feel we have to.
Yeah,
So
Fair enough.
that's my view.
okay.
A lot different when you're selling it for $1.
It is, but
Mm.
it's the same principle.
okay.
Has anyone investigated one last?
That
one?
7 years
About
just
this
became
darn-
like 7 months.
This darn house is getting in the way. Has anyone investigated the State Historic Preservation Office's tax credits? Small projects under $250,000 have very large percentages of tax credit value. Ones in excess of 1 million are very big. Have we looked into
It
that?
has to be privately owned to do that. You have to have a private business. We looked at it for the Waldo.
You did.
Yeah, and we didn't qualify because there wasn't a commercial
Right.
interest there. We were nonprofit. So I don't know if a town can do it.
No.
If it were privately owned, that landowner could conceivably.
There's no incentive for us.
Okay,
Right.
good, thank you.
Okay.
All right. The last item before I wrap up is Gail had asked a question about centralized location for documents.
Can I, just before we
Oh,
go
so-
there?
yeah.
If we are going to have folks making contact with the fire department and committees and Midcoast Conservancy, it would be good to have a way of deciding who's going to do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Assigning,
I'll
Yep.
volunteer with Midcoast and the Conservation Commission if you like, and I'm willing to go to one of their meetings if they put this on the agenda.
okay.
Could that happen this month?
I don't know when their meeting is.
Conservation is going to be tough.
Yeah,
They
I've
haven't.
been talking with the current chair who's actually stepping down now because she's getting a new responsibility. So I don't know when they actually will meet anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe I'll be in touch with you on
Yeah.
someone we can talk to there and not go to one of their meetings
Right.
if they're, are you assuming it might be not disbanding or something?
I don't know. I have to talk.
Okay. Well, Midcoast Conservancy should be able to answer those
Okay, so
questions as well.
Janet- Was taking care of those two. What was the third one? The shellfish?
Is that just when?
I would,
No, I mean, they have an actual full committee and I was gonna get them in touch with Gwen and Abden. I was gonna talk to them at the last meeting, but they didn't have one. So I will make sure that happens.
So somebody.
Unless you want to go to their full committee meeting, that would be the first Thursday in February.
I'd love to have a conversation before then if
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I'd be happy to do
Let's
that.
say, so Gail will do the shellfish, Janet's doing the Midcoast Conservancy and the Conservation Committee.
Yeah, I'll check,
Okay.
get a name from you and just see what the future looks like.
Were
for
there,
them.
were there any other tasks before
Fire
next meeting?
department, you said.
Oh, fire department, but we've already determined that they can't burn it down because it's an asbestos hazard, correct? So we don't have to,
There's certain diligence we would have to perform for them to bring it down.
oh, okay. So I'm happy to contact the fire department.
Yeah, I encourage you to do that because, I mean, spending $5,000 and then burning it down is a lot cheaper
Then,
Than
than
paying to-
tearing it down.
Then
Sure.
turn it in.
Okay.
Yes, indeed.
yeah, I will talk to the fire department.
But if you're going to sell it,
No, we're not
Probably don't want to
necessarily.
burn it then.
Okay,
Oh,
Any-
parenthetically, I talked to Charlie Witherell of former MDLT and Midcoast Conservancy. Yeah, I consider Charlie the Madonic trail guru.
He is.
Yeah.
And he would like to take a walk out there, so I might schedule that and I'll send a note out to everybody when he and I are gonna go poke around.
okay,
We'll follow Max's bushwhacking.
okay.
Get a look at.
Yeah, well,
Marcus
actually,
and then Elida?
Speaking of the trail, like on the timeline, it sounded like there was gonna be a site plan and then it was gonna get approved by DEP and then go before like a community thing? Are
Right.
we doing all that even with like the trail system? Like we stopping all that work to wait for all that, or can we start on the trails and stuff that's not really up? Like the capping's gonna take a while and that's up top, but like the whole bottom half of the property, they're not gonna they're not gonna be in each other's way. You could keep working on the trail while the capping's happening. I just didn't know if you were waiting for community put past the vote we had.
But I think the trail system was approved. It was just a question of how fast we go ahead and do it. That was one of the reasons why we were gonna,
Stopped working on it, that's why.
No, we were slowing and we wanted to
Okay.
meet with Midcoast
that's the point of
Right.
having these
and the
meetings.
Conservation Commission, to see who's gonna actually steward it and to come up with a more, a design. But I personally feel like we should get at least the cap timeline figured out and before we, because
I
where you're
don't
gonna
think
park,
I don't
where
think
you're
they interact at all. Like, I think you can have, you can get the trails done. You don't have to advertise them or open them, but you can work on them.
yeah,
And
potentially.
get them done so that when the capping's done and you have a parking lot, you're ready to go. It's not, okay, the capping's done. Now we start the trails again.
Well, it's figuring out where the
So,
trailhead is and. where
If I
the-
could have people's attention, we are running out of time here. Max says the room is being used, so I think this discussion may happen at the next meeting
Yeah,
as opposed to at the end of this meeting.
yeah.
Alida, did you have a quick
Just
comment?
quickly, can I then assume in order to sort of keep our timeline in mind, that the people who are gonna make connections with outside communities will have something to share with us next meeting, or send Gail and I their conversation, whatever?
Is that fair?
Yeah.
Our next meeting, I think, would be scheduled for Monday, the 6th of February. Is that correct? Does that work for everybody?
Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for a very productive and informative meeting, and we will meet again next month.